So, welcome to another episode of Trouble to Transformation. Today's guest, I have Stephen Francisci from Healing Roots On Up. Stephen is a mental health advocate raising awareness about trauma and the tools to overcome adversity. Welcome, Stephen. I am so glad to have you on today.
It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share my story with you and your audience.
Yes, you have a very important message. I really admire the work that you do, so we need to spread it far and loud.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
excited about
yes.
that.
Absolutely. And just looking at some of your Instagram content, I really enjoy your message. You have a really unique and creative way of getting it out there. You're a great speaker, and a lot of people do need to head over to your Instagram profile. So, Healing Roots On Up, Instagram, right?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Can they find you anywhere else?
No, that's my main platform. I am on Facebook. I was on TikTok, and then the whole thing that happened here in the U.S. with that, so that has
Yes.
kind of gone away. But yeah, this is my main platform for sharing my story. So
So Healing Roots On Up, that's a very unique handle. Tell the viewers how you came up with that.
yeah, so as I started reflecting and going through the process of healing, I was trying to figure out a name that would kind of resonate with what I've been going through. And as I discovered, as I was working through coming up with a name, it all goes back to our roots.
Mm,
And so I was like, all right, so, I was thinking about a tree, and, the tree is only as healthy as its root system. So as I started thinking about my own root system in my childhood, I was like, okay, so my roots were pretty traumatic. And I needed
ah,
to go back to my roots, my childhood,
mhm,
even to the point when I was born and the stories I heard about when I was born and the rejection right out the gate. I was like, I need to go back and revisit that. A lot of people may not agree with that, but I found it very necessary in order to allow myself to feel the pain of what happened in my past and to face it. And a lot of people don't want to do that, and that's okay too. But for me, I felt it was absolutely the beginning of the healing process. So that's why I
yes.
came up with the name Healing Our Roots On Up,
Ah,
because
yes.
as we heal the roots, the rest of us heals as well. So
Yes, I really, really love that, Stephen. And I'm a huge advocate for the inner child work myself. I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but you need to see it to feel it to heal it. Otherwise, I find that some of those things just have a way of bubbling up to the surface, and affecting our quality of life. So, would you mind sharing your early years and in the environment that you grew up in?
yeah, well, I'd love to. I was born and raised. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Okay, and grew up mainly in Queens. Um, so my childhood was rife with abuse and neglect. And so I had a father, and just, for anyone's hearing this, I've worked through a lot of this. I've come to a place of forgiveness and love for even those that have hurt me. And so, but my dad was very abusive, verbally. He was very critical. And then on top of that, there was a lot of the psychological abuse, shaming messages, body shaming. And then there was physical abuse as well. And it went on
Mm,
for a very long time. And my mom was didn't realize at the time, but there was a huge abandonment wound right from when I was born.
mhm.
I was born into a family that's Italian. Everyone in my family has dark hair, olive complexion, straight, really look Italian. And then here comes me, this really white, pale kid with orange hair. And my mom still
Wow.
tells me the story. She's like, when they rolled me out, she's like, that's not my baby. So that hearing that, and I had to work through those words because hearing that
Yes.
was saying, I was rejected right out of the womb.
Mm.
And that was painful. It almost makes me tear up even, thinking about it again. But hearing
Mhm.
those words and going back to, that's not my baby. And I came out, I didn't look like anything like it in my family. So,
Yeah.
I had, my mother who I love dearly. We have a good relationship these days, and she's in her 70s and she's working on herself based off of the work that I've been doing. So she started
Yes.
to self-reflect, which is beautiful.
Mhm.
Um, and my dad passed away about a year and a half ago. So he actually said he was sorry for the things that he's done.
Mm.
But going back to the childhood again, there was no place that was safe, and I thought
Oh.
the home was supposed to be a safe place, and it wasn't.
Mhm.
And then after that, I went into school, and then I started to get bullied a lot.
Oh.
So even family members, were abusive, and they made like to make fun of me, and they thought it was all in fun, But for me, I internalized all that as if there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, childhood was pretty tough,
Yeah.
and so yeah. So anyone out there who's gone through something similar to what I'm describing, um, it's challenging, it's tough, but we can change the narrative of our own story by doing the work and
Mhm.
healing our own wounds. So
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Stephen. And I would imagine like there was a lot of bullying and teasing and ridiculing when you were a little bit different with the red hair and light complexion. Was that why the bullying started?
oh yeah, I had
Yeah.
freckles. I mean, it was really hard. I mean, when you think about the black sheep of a family,
Hmm.
I totally resonated with that for years and years. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't look like my family, and they seem to want to pick on me and use me as the scapegoat. You know,
Hmm.
my sister and I today have a great relationship, but back in the day, and I know now why she was doing it, but there was times where she was like, "Oh, Steven's hitting me," or she would start making a fuss about something, and then without question, I was the one getting beat.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I really resonated with the term scapegoat,
Yeah.
and it sucked. It's really hard, and we want to feel safe and accepted. And I spent a lot of years of my life looking for that outside of me
Yeah.
until I learned to start giving that to myself.
Yeah. Okay. So, what were some of the critical challenges that you faced during your formative years?
The critical challenges I faced was not feeling supported, loved, accepted, encouraged, validated. I grew up in a highly invalidating environment, and so I didn't learn how to trust people in my life. I didn't trust authority. So there was a lot of challenges based on my
Mm.
own caregivers were not trustworthy to me as a child. So I had to learn
Ah,
to
yes.
develop trust not only in others, but I had to learn to trust myself first because I didn't trust myself. I couldn't trust the world, and the whole world was, gaslighting and invalidating me, right? I didn't even know who I was. So I really had to find my own
Yeah.
voice and my authenticity, and that takes time. So it's not something that just
Hmm.
clicks right away. It's a process. So it took me a long time to get to where I'm at,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so but those were some of the critical challenges for me growing up.
Mm. Yeah, I it's so important for people to understand that during the developmental years that when we've been abused, any type of abuse, whether it's emotional or mental or physical, that it sends a shockwave through your life and especially if it's at the hands of our caregivers. And the first thing like I did hear you say earlier that my sense of safety. And then I find that a lot of young men that have that kind of ripped out from under them sometimes they can turn to crime and violence. Now, was there any behaviors that you saw in yourself?
Yeah, I wouldn't have ever described myself as a violent person,
Hmm.
but I found myself in situations, especially in New York, that were pretty risky.
Ah,
Yeah, I,
yes.
I was hanging out with certain gang members and stuff, and I thought that was a place where I can fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember getting chased down. Me and my friends wanted to get in a fight with some other guys, and I remember a guy pulling a gun out, and we just took off in our cars, and yeah, we were in some pretty crazy situations. So, but me
Yes.
myself,
Yeah.
I wasn't that big of a fighter. I didn't really like to fight. I was probably more of a coward. I wasn't that good of a fighter neither. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I tried to avoid fights if I could. So, but yeah, I
Yeah.
was definitely involved in. I seen a lot of violence too. Um,
Yes.
but New York's a tough place to grow up, and so yeah, it was all around me.
Yeah, and that's what we find is that a lot of young men that go through those childhood adversities do find a life of crime because they what happens, I think it's you try to regain your sense of power, and that masculinity part, right? We see it, it's a very common theme, especially with the men that I work with who are violent offenders. A lot of people have this, I think there's a stigma, where it's like, oh, well, they have decisions, but if you look at the child developmental stages, no, it just happens, right? It's part of the course.
You said something interesting is that a lot of us felt powerless when we were children
Mm,
because we were.
yes.
We didn't have safety, we didn't have connection. And the one thing that happened for me growing up is in order for me to feel powerful, I needed to become aggressive. Not only in,
Yes.
I worked out a lot, I got pretty big, so my way of protecting myself was becoming big and intimidating. If I wanted to control
Yes.
someone and exert my power over someone, I didn't communicate in a kind, loving way. I would come at you,
Yeah.
and I would come at you hard, and I would do my best to intimidate you to get you to back down. And that is how I felt
Ah, yes.
powerful, but that's not really what powerful means. That's controlling and it's abusive, and that is not
Yes.
what a healthy masculinity looks like. So, yeah,
Yeah.
learning
Agreed.
assertiveness was very important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really well said. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Was there any signs that would indicate that there was trouble ahead? Like, did you start getting in trouble with the law?
I, you know, I didn't get into. I avoided that for some reason. I was out doing graffiti. I was getting out late at night. My parents didn't even know it. I was doing all kinds of stupid crap. Um, Not too much in the drug scene. I dabbled a little bit in the drug scene, but for me, I started becoming promiscuous at a very young age, well before I was ready for it. And that was another thing
Ah,
is getting involved in sexual relationships at the age of 15, which is it's really young, especially for a
yes, it
person
is.
who is just not well developed emotionally at all. I was a wreck.
Yes.
So that was also
Yes.
some of the troubles that came my way that I invited. I was looking for intimacy and connection, and yeah, so that was more of some of the troubling things that happened for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true because, like a 15-year-old at that time, we think that we have it all figured out. We know everything. But the human brain doesn't even finish developing until 25. Like 25 years old, you're still considered an adolescent because there's just cognitive processing that hasn't quite matured yet. And even though you might not have gotten into trouble with the law, you were definitely probably taking a lot of risks that could have led you there.
I did. I took a lot of risks, and I will say something about development. And I know that I think they said the brain takes to the age of 25 to develop, but for me, I think I experienced the term arrested development. So as a 40-something-year-old man,
Ah,
I was probably trapped in a young teenager's mindset. So
ah,
and
interesting.
I think that's what happens with trauma is our growth gets stunted at an age that is we don't develop emotionally along lines with people who haven't experienced as much trauma as some of us have. So I
Yes,
really I remember creating a reel, and it portrayed being stuck in trauma, and you feel like you're stuck, and I didn't realize that I truly was stuck, and I didn't know how to do anything better, and I was stuck at a very
yes.
very adolescent age in my mind.
Ah, that's really interesting. And it's probably got a lot to do with, the belief systems that we have as well. Like, I mean, deep rooted beliefs, we go throughout our life with those beliefs thinking that that is the truth, like limiting beliefs, and they're not necessarily even our own beliefs. But if you were hanging around with a group of individuals who were committing crime and were high risk lifestyle, we are who we hang around with too. So I could see why some of us are emotionally stunted when we have the same friends and the same habits and the same behaviors, for decades.
Yeah, and going back to the teenage years, I do recall especially in 14, 13, 14, 15. I was out drinking almost all the time.
Ah, yes.
We would, in New York, you can go to a bodega and buy alcohol. They didn't ask, they just want to make money. So I remember drinking a 40. I was like 14 years old, a freshman in high school, and hanging out on the railroad tracks. And that was a pretty regular occurrence. So I didn't realize I had already developed an unhealthy relationship with alcohol in my teenage years.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's
Yeah. What's a bodega?
a bodega is just like a corner store in New York.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a
okay.
corner like candy store that sells alcohol and the newspaper and lotto tickets.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of them in
Yeah.
New York, and they usually refer to them as the corner bodega. So
Oh,
yeah,
interesting. And they were selling to a minor? How did you navigate that?
yeah,
Yeah.
no ID, no
Yeah.
nothing. I go in and they be like, I have a 40, no questions. And, yeah,
Yeah.
and I even went to bars. I was 15 or 16 when I first started going to bars in New York.
Yeah. Yeah, I share that similar experience too. We had like booze cans or bootleggers, and there was always somebody that was able to buy liquor, and we were minors. You look back on that and you think, "Oh my God, like that's a jail sentence now." But back then it was just what we did.
That's it. It was what we did,
Yeah.
and there was really not a whole lot of oversight. There was not a whole lot of
Yes.
pressure on these stores to, ask for ID or anything like that. And I tell people, that, some of the stories that I have from when I was a teenager, they almost don't believe me. But I'm like, ask my
Yes.
friends from New York, they will tell you, and they will be like, "Yep."
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's interesting. And the thing is too, like looking back even with my parents and such, we never had any tools. There was no one to support us through this development in our early years. There was no one to show us the birds and the bees and what's right and what's wrong. We were feral.
we, were, I love that.
We were
We
feral.
were
Yeah,
feral. I had no guidance. There was no talk about
yeah,
sex, which also
exactly.
leads to shame. And it also leads to sex being a
Yes.
taboo subject when it's actually
Yeah.
it's a natural part of the human condition. It's something that I, with
Yes.
my children today, try to create an environment that is safe to talk about it because I don't want them going out and figuring it out on their own or from their friends because God knows that's what I did, and that got me in a lot of trouble. So there should be
Yes.
no shame around sex. Sex is a very healthy part of us in our life, and so
Yes.
yeah, that's the things that I'm changing now with my children is trying to create an open, safe, supportive environment to express themselves and what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that at all.
Yeah, I really love that because, I have lots of friends, in my circle that have teenage boys, anywhere from like say 12 to 18. And I always ask them, like, have you had that conversation, that awkward conversation? And they won't do it. They won't discuss those things at the table. And I'm like, you should probably be having these conversations because somebody is. And the thing is, when they're learning from their friends or things on the internet or whatever, then they're probably not getting the right message that they actually need. Because, like, as you know, I work with a lot of men, and some of the issues that come up is like even pornography, how it's hijacked their sexuality and it's caused intimacy issues in their relationships and betrayal and all of the things. And when I ask that question, like, how old were you? And they're like, oh, I started looking at that when I was 8 and the average is probably around 11 or 12. And because, they're curious, some friend showed them, but then nobody was there to help them navigate that.
Absolutely, and I too
Yeah.
struggled with porn addiction for a long time. I also started finding porno magazines and certain hangouts when I
Yeah.
was 12, 11, 12 years old. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's some shaming stories around, finding that stuff at that age and my mom finding out about it. And it wasn't presented to me in a way that was like, "Hey, let's talk about this." Like it's like, "What are you doing
Yes.
with this?" And all of a sudden the
Yeah.
shame like I'm bad, comes all over me.
Oh,
And
yes. Yeah.
so yeah, I felt, sex was very shameful. But and I don't want to mix that up. Like, I'm not saying pornography is the best place to learn. However, if your child is found with pornography, the last thing you want to do is shame them for what they're trying to figure out on their own.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I so agree with that. And the thing is, too, is that they're curious. The hormones are going online. They do need to learn about these things. But when you shame them, then they just fall into that secret because the desire is so deeply rooted because it's instinctual that they probably will continue to look at it. But now they're living a lie and this big secret, which now creates more shame. So it's a really tricky topic, but if there's any parents out there or anybody that has, even nephews and nieces, like have these conversations. It's awkward, yes, but it needs to happen.
one of the things that I've done with my children, I have a daughter who's in middle school. She's 12 years old, and the way that I've started to open up the conversation is very gently, is
Hmm.
just talking about it in a way that's kind of matter of fact, not in a way that's seems uncomfortable or off-putting, but it just in a way that's normal. I want them to feel like it's okay to talk about sex or even the
Yes.
word sex. I used to hear the word sex and felt ashamed.
Hmm. Yes.
And yeah, I don't I want that word to be okay to be spoken in my home without there being shame associated with the word in and of itself.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think now too with the younger generation, the internet is a very dangerous place now for young people. Like especially for young boys right now, statistically 12 to 18, there's a lot of young men that are being sextorted, they call it. And, because people are sexting or sending pictures back and forth, and it's actually not the person that they think that they're talking to. So there's a lot of dangers around that. So I think educating your children is so, so important.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I would also
Yeah.
say, there are some kids out there that I'm aware of that have actually been asked for nude pictures in their young teenage years,
Ooh,
and then the people who have those pictures have used them as a weapon to control the other
yes.
person. So I think it's
Yes.
important for us as parents to not or to communicate to our kids that don't send anything that is private of yours through any type of
Yes.
phone communication, internet. Keep it private and share that with someone that you grow in safety and in trust with, not
Yes.
just for an instant dopamine hit or to please someone else.
Yes.
There's a lot of people
Yeah.
pleasing behaviors behind that, and that's something that I'm
Yeah.
working.
Very well
Yeah, that's
said.
a lot. That's
Yeah.
something I'm working with on my daughters, is to
Yeah.
have a voice. You don't need to please or be nice. Speak your truth,
Mhm.
and that's very important for us as parents to advocate and communicate to our children.
Yeah, so, so, so true. Because I mean, a young adolescent, they're so worried about fitting in, being liked. If I say no or if I set boundaries, then this person's not going to like me or they might get mad at me or whatever. And so teaching people boundaries is really important. I'm glad. That's really excellent that you're having those conversations.
Yeah, yeah, and it's tough. My
Yeah.
daughter, she was traumatized when her mom and I had a pretty volatile divorce, and
Hmm.
yeah, so I'm supporting her. She's in therapy right now, and there's no shame in that. Trying to teach her the skills to learn to process tough emotions and walk through situations and not be
Yeah.
shut down. So it's tough, but we're doing our
Yeah.
best to support our children.
Good. Excellent. So, Stephen, maybe we'll fast forward a little bit now. How old were you when you joined the military? Let's talk about that part of your life.
Sure. So at the age of 17, I was approached by a recruiter in my high school, and I was
Hmm.
barely making it through high school. I was, struggling. I think teachers felt sorry for me. They were like, "This kid is struggling. We're just
Yeah.
gonna pass him," and they did. But ultimately, a recruiter started coming to see me, and I made, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I made the choice to give him some attention. And then that was it. He was like
Mm.
at my house. He was from Jamaica. He brought my father a bottle of Jamaican rum. And next thing you know, my parents are signing off at me at the age of 17 to join the Navy.
Wow.
So I turned 18 in August of 1993, and November I was off to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. And
Wow.
wow, like what a drastic change. But I knew that college wasn't for me at that time. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, what is it that I can do with my life? And I was like, I like cooking,
Yeah.
So let me see if the military
Ah,
has cooks. Sure enough, they do.
yeah.
And so I
Of
signed up. I
course.
became a culinary specialist and was off to
Yeah.
boot camp. And let me tell you, talk about feeling alone though, like going into, and that was even more traumatizing. Boot
Oh.
camp, I mean, you go from getting yelled at and screamed at home, and now you're getting yelled at and screamed at in the military. It's like, it's rough.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because a lot of the men that I talked to that had like they had dreams of maybe joining the military. It was generally because they were really angry inside, and I had some of them even say to me that they wanted to go legally blow shit up. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, I don't know if that's all for all the right reasons here. Um, but yeah, I mean, there is some very rigorous training. And I feel like sometimes that training is like, it's almost like they want to break your spirit.
They do, and I would say today's military is much different and approaches training in a much different way because people like myself experience PTSD as part of the process of the training in the military. And I don't say that as a dig at the United States military. I'm very grateful
Yep.
and appreciative that I served a wonderful country. And so
Mhm.
there's just a process that the military is growing, and they're growing on how their approach to training and things that military folks are exposed to, they're starting to do
Yeah.
better, and they're starting to change the ways that they train people in the military, which is a good thing. But they're learning from
Yeah.
people like myself who served back in the '90s with PTSD, and
Yeah.
the military's taking care of me. So the Veterans
Yeah.
Affairs taking care of me. But yeah, there was additional traumas that was incurred in the military as well.
Yeah. Was that due to like being in front lines anywhere or like in dangerous high risks
I
areas?
wasn't in combat, so we have the Marines and the Army. Those are pretty much the ones that are boots on the ground. I
Okay.
was on a naval ship. I went over to the Mediterranean on several deployments for long periods of time. The one thing that I did was I sat off the coast of Somalia back in, if you ever seen the movie Black Hawk Down. So that's something that we were supporting. But I was exposed to stuff being in the Middle East that I'm dealing with today as
Yes.
well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm still discovering about being where I was 30 years ago,
Hmm.
and how it's affecting me at here. I'm about to turn 50 this year, and how it's affecting my life
Yeah.
today. So there's things that
Yeah.
that's still coming to my own awareness about how my military service
Yeah.
has affected me today. So
Yeah. So, I mean, what I heard then, there was like really no combat happening, but there still must have been atrocities to human, like to, like, did you see like crimes against humanity sort of things?
not
And,
firsthand, it was just being
okay.
in the situation. It's being we
Uh,
were the Navy is was more of supportive of the people that were doing, I would say, the heavier lifting, and
okay.
I don't want to minimize what the Navy's role was in all of that, but
Of
the
course.
Army
Yeah.
and the Marines were the ones that were facing pretty tragic stuff. And so I can't really
Yeah.
speak to that type of exposure. My exposure is a little bit
Okay.
different. That
Hmm.
yeah, it was a little bit different. It's just the culture of the military at the
Yeah.
time, and it's changing. It's really gotten,
Yeah.
it's getting better. And I'm hearing a lot of
Yeah.
veterans today, and even active duty people today, and they tell me that how they experience boot camp and training, and it's wow, it's so much different.
Yeah. Yeah, so like with that boot camp and training and getting yelled at and just kind of being re-traumatized, was there any point in that where it started to shift for you, or did you just kind of become numb to it all, or did it get worse?
I would say I became numb. I had become numb, and I think if anything, it fueled my anger and rage. because
Ah,
it's like,
yeah,
when is it going to stop? When am I going to get out of the abusive yelling? You know, I wasn't thinking that, but I'm telling you, as I'm reflecting,
yeah,
when does it stop? As I'm going through it, and I just became more and more rage filled. I was a really, really angry
ooh,
dude, you know? And so,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
spent 7 years in the military. Um, I did not trust authority. I did not do well as far as making rank. I spent 7 years
okay,
and I only made it up to an E4, which is not far. Some of that
okay,
had to do with probably my own getting in trouble with the
yeah,
officer level versus enlisted. Yeah, so I caused the military people some trouble. I definitely pushed back,
ah,
so I wasn't
okay,
the absolute most compliant, obedient petty officer in the Navy.
yeah,
So,
right,
but yeah, so I did 7 years, and that was when I was like, you know what? I got to get out of here. I wasn't making hardly any money, and I was like, I cannot imagine doing this for the rest of my life. And wanted to get married,
yeah.
wanted to have children, and then being deployed for months on end. I just like that's just not only traumatizing to me, but also it would be traumatizing to children if I had children and served in the military.
Yeah. Yeah, really difficult to be on the road all the time. You know, I've experienced 15 years in the oil field, and it was always like my life was in a duffel bag. I was always away, and it gets tiresome sometimes,
That's what my life was.
right?
I lived in a
Yeah.
what I would say probably a 2 by 8 rack, and I had you lifted up
Yes.
the rack, and then
Yeah.
that's where I put my clothes, and I had a small locker. That was my life. At least for the first
Oh,
four
yeah.
years,
Yeah.
it was humbling.
Yeah.
It was very humbling,
Yeah.
you know.
Now, were you allowed to get off the ship in some of those countries, or did you have to stay on the vessel?
We were allowed to get off. So my first deployment, we went to like 13 different countries. I got to
Okay.
see a
Yeah.
lot of the Mediterranean. We were in Ukraine, and these are some of the places that I'm referring to in Egypt, Israel,
Yeah.
where I may experience some exposure back from the 90s. But we were
Yeah.
allowed to go out on liberty, but we were very restricted to our time and how far we can go when we had to be back. But yeah, I got to experience other countries in a
Yeah.
pretty cool way that a lot of people haven't. But
Yeah.
again, it was through the military. So now I'm going back and trying to revisit these countries as a civilian to really appreciate it.
Because I would imagine it would have shaped your perspective on humanity in some of those countries too, with the level of poverty and the war and everything, like a lot of human suffering.
There is, and there was
Mm.
certain places that I went to in certain countries where I definitely seen a third world
Yeah,
country and what that looks like. And then
yeah,
there's countries that I've seen that are really just as first world as us. Here in the
yeah,
United States, I've been to England, France, Italy, Spain, Greece. I've been to a lot of countries. But then,
yeah.
even places in Africa, there were definitely countries that were definitely behind the times, and it's just hard to see that,
Yes,
But
yes,
so it
I can
also gave
imagine.
me an appreciation of where I was coming from too.
Now, if you could pick one of those countries as being your favorite, where you could like literally pack your bags and move to, which one would it be?
Italy or Greece, and I'm actually going to Italy.
Oh,
I'm going to
nice.
Italy in April by myself just to go back and revisit
Wow.
several countries. But Greece was also phenomenal. I had some really good experiences. I won't share them here, but they were personal, but
Yeah,
very, very fun.
yeah,
But Greece was a
yeah.
beautiful place to visit. But yeah, those are probably my top two, Italy and Greece.
Do you still have family in Italy?
I don't. That's where my father's side came from, northern
Yeah,
Italy.
yeah.
So I'm just trying to get. My grandmother was from Naples. I've been in Naples, but I'm gonna go back and see. I'm gonna go to Rome, Florence, and Venice in April and just see those places. Those are the
Ah,
iconic, touristy places. But I feel like it's worth
yeah.
going to see.
Teeny bit jealous. Good for you. Yeah, and April's right around the corner
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I've been
So,
planning it over the
yeah.
last 2 months. So.
Oh, right on. I'm happy for you. That's going to be exciting. Yeah. Hopefully you'll have to make some
Oh, I
posts.
will. I definitely will. I will make some
Okay,
posts and
good.
reels when I'm there for
Yeah.
sure.
Now, okay, so now with being in the military 7 years, what happened after? Like who were you when you stepped out of that role?
Well, again, I was still a mess. I was in a relationship, and I went out and I went to do construction with her father, and I
Hmm.
was making very, very little money. And it was almost traumatizing making the decision to get out of a place that I felt supported in financially.
Yeah.
And so I was now getting out and going on my own. So I got into the construction industry. I was digging ditches literally for $11 an hour back in the day. It was,
Mm,
yeah, peanuts. And I did that for
yeah.
maybe a year and a half. And I'm like, wow, I cannot see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And that is when I decided that I was going to go back to college. So
Yeah.
I'd made the decision and I actually left the construction industry and I started out in security. I was making like $8.65 an hour, but as being a disabled veteran, I did have some income to offset that.
Mhm.
And so I did pursue a business degree in college and was working my way up in the security industry. And so within a few years, I was actually went from being a security officer to a branch manager. I was running the security industry for Hampton Roads for a very large international company.
Yeah.
So I grew very
Okay.
quickly. But one of the
Yeah.
ways for me in growing, being highly narcissistic and very self-centered, I used methods that were not always ethical, not very kind. I wouldn't mind,
Ah.
using others to get ahead. So
Ah,
I
interesting.
think that's what narcissism does is that we will want to be successful, be seen, we want to be, we want the power, right? Because we didn't
Yes.
have power as
Yeah.
children. So what did I seek? I saw power and money. And that's what I was
Yes.
chasing. I was chasing status and
Ah, yeah.
yep. So that's what drove me. However, it came at the cost of relationships. It came at the cost of really my own integrity. I didn't really have any integrity. I was willing to do
Yeah.
whatever I needed to do to get ahead.
Yeah, that quest for status and wealth and validation, right? It's lonely at the top though.
It is, and I was not a good boss. And there's still today. I think about some of the people that have worked for me, being in a
Yeah.
position in management where I was a jerk, you know. And
Mm,
so, if I
yeah.
still have the opportunity for anyone who's ever worked for me in the past, I am sorry for being an asshole, because I was at
Yeah.
times. And so,
Yeah.
um, but that's not, it's not who I am anymore, but that's definitely who I was. I was not the kindest boss, but thankfully there is one person that I still talk to this day who has stayed with me as a friend and has watched me change, and it's pretty cool to have that relationship still.
Yeah. Isn't that incredible though how all those years later all of those things catch up? They catch up to us, you know. Sometimes even when we're least expecting it, but I always say like I'm a big follower of like universal laws. And if we're creating these disharmonious acts and we upset the harmony in the pond that ripples out and it comes back, but I always say, and I'll say this a lot in my podcasts, is that wisdom will trump karma.
That's true. I like that. I like that.
Yeah. So as long as we can bring forth the wisdom from those experiences, and do good in the world with that wisdom, I do believe that we can restore the harmony in the pond.
That's beautiful. I love that. And that's something that I think
Yeah,
I'm
thank
doing
you.
now is I'm reversing,
Yeah.
I definitely reaped what I've sown, probably tenfold. And it's been brutal.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm giving back. Everything that I happened to me, I no longer see myself as a victim of, and that was a choice. That was a realization that I came to, because I spent
Yeah.
a lot of years living and feeling like a victim to everything that's happened to me. But it wasn't until I felt powerful was when I no longer accepted that I was a victim. That's when I
Ah,
regained my
good one.
power.
Yeah.
Is that I'm not a victim and I can change and I'm willing to change and I'm open to change, and that's when change happened.
Yeah, so true. And with that validation and quest for status and wealth, like what were your social circles like? Like what did the typical night out look like for you?
I was probably repeating the stuff I was doing in my teenage years. I
Ah,
was I was drawn to people that were willing to connect with me on the level of the immature self that I was. I wanted to joke, I wanted to drink, I wanted to chase women, rinse and repeat. So
yeah.
that was my thing. I was attracted to people that were not faithful. I was attracted to people that wanted to go and, go to a strip club or go to, flirt with women. I was unfaithful to everyone and everything, including myself. And it
Yeah.
cost me. It cost me. And everything
Yeah.
that I've ever done in the dark has been brought to light. Not one single
Yeah.
thing that I've done in the dark wasn't exposed. And that was my lesson
Wow.
in learning integrity. 'Cause everything I thought that was being concealed was revealed.
Yes. Yeah, that's powerful. Because even things we do behind closed doors, right? There's just this energy about it that ripples out. People can even sense that about individuals too, highly intuitive
Oh,
people.
I can sense it in people that have skeletons in their closet, and it's not out of a place of judgment.
Yes.
I can see the
Yeah.
shame in their body and their body language. And I don't mean that in a way to I
Yes.
don't want people to feel shame, or I'm not psychoanalyzing people, but you can just see how people show up in conversation. You can feel and read the energy that they
Yes.
have stuff to work through. And
Yeah.
I can only see it because I remember it and how I was. And it's hard to put that in words, but you can kind of see it when people have something that they're hiding.
It's so true. Yeah. I regularly talk about that in my sessions with the men that I work with. And one of the questions I ask is like, can you get angry from a thought alone? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, does that anger have a physical sensation in the body? Well, yeah. I'm like, well, then there's a posture to that. And shame also is a physical sensation in the body that has a posture, then which creates these outward behaviors too. And a lot of them are so subtle that we can't actually pick it up with our naked eye, but if you actually slowed the tape down, you can see micro expressions. Yeah, and the thing is though, even though you might not think that the human eye is picking up on that, your subconscious does.
Yep. Yep. And we learn that in childhood, especially growing up in environments
Yes,
where survival and learning to be hyper vigilant and to read facial expressions is where we learn that behavior. And that is a superpower.
absolutely.
That's not something that we need to
Yeah.
do away with. That is something that we need to integrate and
Yes.
keep with us because we get
Yeah.
to read and understand people through those micro expressions. So that's a gift.
It's so
Yeah,
true.
it's not it's something that I don't yeah, I don't regret having that gift. It's something
Yeah.
that has served me.
Yes. Yeah. You learned how to read a room because you had to. Like yeah, feeding off of the emotions of the adults, and if you're especially if the household was volatile or walking on eggshells, right? And I always say too, like, have you ever had that feeling where you walk into a room and you get a bad feeling about somebody? Well, where does that come from? And that's what's happening in our nervous system is that we're actually reading those very subtle clues.
And it's something
Yeah.
um one of the things I've learned about that is sometimes I have these feelings and these sensations and these emotions and thoughts. And what I've learned to recognize is to not make decisions based on the thoughts that come to me or the emotions I'm feeling or the intuitive feelings I'm
Yeah.
getting, but rather shift from that, pause, and reflect on what are my values here, regardless of what I'm feeling about a person. And it's important to
Ooh, I
approach
love
other
that.
people from a place of values, which I didn't have any in the past.
Yeah.
But as I developed
Yes.
agency, as it developed and come to a place understanding that I am the CEO of my life. And with my
Yes.
the ability to be a CEO of my life, I also have a mission in life. I also backed it up with my values. So what are my values in relationships, even with people that I don't feel like I can trust? And some of them are very
Yeah.
simple. Be kind, be loving,
Yes.
be a
Yep.
good listener.
Yep.
Because when we
Yep.
model that for people that are still stuck in a traumatic state, when we're kind and loving, regardless of what our thoughts or emotions are about a person, we come from our heart space and we get to extend love to that person and acceptance without judgment of where
Yep.
they're at.
Yeah, I love that. Meeting them where they're at. Yeah, that's powerful. Now, so with that lifestyle of the quest for status and wealth, there was a lot of like partying, probably drugs and alcohol,
Mainly alcohol for me.
mainly alcohol. Yeah. Did you hit rock bottom? Like, was there a pivotal moment in that phase of your life where you had to crawl out of the trenches?
I think I hit rock bottom several times. I think I was a little dense.
Mm.
I think I needed to hit it several times. Um,
Yeah, me too. Same thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I got fired from a job. I was a general manager. I sent a stupid, immature email off to my group, and that was the culture I was in my security days, where it was applauded. And I went to a different culture, and I sent a similar email. I thought it was funny, and I got fired for it. So that was kind of like rock bottom at that time. And
Hmm.
then there was definitely different things that have happened after that time. I got terminated from that job, and that was when the real, I would say, the turning point happened,
Hmm.
and that was involving my motorcycle accident.
Oh.
So May 23rd, 2015, I was involved in a near fatal motorcycle accident. My wife at the time had just given birth to our daughter, who was only 8 days old. My parents had come down from New York to visit. They were driving back home that day. I was going to meet my friend from lunch, and I'm doing about 55 miles an hour down the road, going to meet my friend for lunch. And this lady pulls out, and just that was the last I remembered. Sustained a traumatic brain injury, broke every bone in my face. I had screws in every quadrant of my jaws, a titanium plate across my sinus cavity, 20 screws,
Wow.
road rash. It was awful. It was
Yeah.
it was awful, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. And the reason
Wow.
why I say that, it was at that point where it made me stop. It was at that point that made me. It almost forced me into a place where I had to look at myself, and that I think
Wow.
that was the beginning of the change, because I lost everything.
Yeah.
There was no more money to
Oh.
chase. There was no more power or status to chase. I was on the road to disability, and everything was falling
Oh,
away.
wow.
You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Did you almost die from that accident? Like, was it
yeah,
a
it
close
was
call?
close. It was close.
Yeah.
55 miles an hour, and I was wearing a half helmet. I went flying, I don't remember any of it, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I hit the front part of my right here so hard that this like just
Yeah.
exploded and rippled and broke every bone in my face.
Oh.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't remember all of it, but all I know is that it took me a long time
Hmm.
to heal from that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. How long were you in the medical system over that accident?
is the part that that is kind of mind blowing to people. And this wasn't out of
Yeah.
a thing of this wasn't coming from a place of like, oh wow, what a miracle. This was due to a little bit of me having a hard time stopping. So I
Hmm.
spent, I think it was close to a week in the hospital, and then I got out, and then a week later I found another job.
What? Wow.
And yeah, I was like, there's no way I can let this come in the way of putting food on the table and blah, blah. Like, I had to get back to work. The problem was,
Yeah.
is I went back to work, and over the next 12 to 18 months, I went through six different jobs after being with the company for 14 years. There was a problem.
Okay.
I was flying to different locations for business trips, and I was having panic attacks on the plane.
Oh, okay.
I would show up to work and my body was just buzzing. I was shaking. And I'm like, I cannot function anymore. Like my body was shutting down. And that was finally when I turned it in. I was like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I was in a
Yeah.
really, really bad place.
Yeah. So like the PTSD from the accident then was that causing the panic attacks, do you think? Like that overwhelming doom?
I would say that was part of it, but I would also include and say that all of the unresolved trauma from childhood was all
Ah, yeah.
compounded on top of that motorcycle accident. So I had so much to unpack, you know,
Yeah.
and it was really challenging, and it was bringing me to my knees. This is
Yeah.
where I was starting to get to rock bottom, like probably
Yeah.
the lowest I could have ever been.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you have to navigate any prescription pills around the accident?
Not necessarily prescription pills. I didn't get involved. I didn't, I was never really into pain pills and stuff like that. For me, having psychiatric issues for such a long time, I was on a ton of psychiatric medications
Okay.
for years and years
Yeah.
and years. And
Okay.
that is one of the things that I would say from all the work I've done. I can tell you at one point I was taking up to 20 pills a day. And as of
Wow.
today, and out of those 20 pills, I would probably say probably close to 15 of them, 12 to 15 were psychiatric medication. And as of
Okay.
today, I am on zero psychiatric medications.
Excellent. Wow. That's
Yeah,
excellent.
it's absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. I was diagnosed as bipolar 25 years ago, and I've done so much work and, spoke to a psychologist, and it was really just unresolved trauma. And
Yes.
as I started to unpack the trauma, I think this is where I tend to look at my life and be like, man, this feels like a miracle. Because I don't think there's a lot of people who
Excellent.
spend a lifetime on medications are able to come off of them.
Mhm. Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. And I always talk about like the window of tolerance, with the trauma, the unresolved trauma, like it all gets stuffed down so deep until we have these life events that happen that now blow us out of the window of tolerance because nothing else can fit in there, and it generally starts to spill out in the weirdest moments, right? Like you said, all of a sudden it caught up to you, just taking a plane, starting getting panic attacks. Where did that come from? So I really love that ability to lean into that unresolved trauma piece.
yeah, that was the thing, and that is one of the things that I kind of advocate today is that we're quick to treat the symptoms, but we are hesitant
Yeah.
to treat the root of the
Yes.
problem. And I don't want to get political or anything like that, but I think that has a lot, or even maybe not political, but there's a lot of companies out there that would not benefit from treating the roots. And that is one of the things that I'm kind of
Agreed.
advocating against is big
Yeah.
pharma. Because I think,
Yeah.
I don't want to start a war with big pharma, but I'm saying this is one of the things I'm starting to advocate is that we need to learn to treat the roots of problems. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who capitalize off treating symptoms and keeps them in business.
Uh-huh. Yes.
So,
Yeah, I agree. And even as a counselor, I see a lot of people that are on antidepressants, antipsychotic, whatnot. And I mean, I get it. When we're way out here in a crisis, we need to tone down or numb some of those really big feels that disrupt our life. I get that. However, people need to understand that it's also going to numb the ability to feel in all situations. So it really inhibits your ability to feel joy, to connect with others. Some people feel no motivation in the things that they used to love to do, and it's because the drugs that were meant to bring them from out here to here are keeping them here. So I always encourage patients to kind of like wean off eventually. Is that how you did it? How did you come off of all the prescriptions?
well, I did. Yeah, mine was definitely a process, weaning off of medications. And what I
Yeah.
discovered, and if anyone who's experienced a lot of trauma, I'm not trying to invalidate your experience by saying don't take psychiatric medications. My story was slow, and there was a slow process. I took one medication away, and I would talk to my doctor. I'm like, this one's not working, and that one would go away. And then one by one, they started falling off. And as I got healthier and learned, became more resilient by doing the work that I'm doing, expanding my window of tolerance, right? Which you spoke about. But the biggest thing was I learned now is that an antidepressant is not a bad thing. When my dad died in July of 2023, I was in the midst of going through a divorce. I've been married 3 times, been
Yeah.
through divorce 3 times. There's no shame in it. I can talk about it now. In the past, I couldn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
But I was going through hell. And that was the first time I did go back on a psychiatric medication, and that was an antidepressant that I stayed on for about a year. And as I started to get
Yes.
through that, I was like, okay, now it's time. I want to feel my feelings again because a lot of things get stunted. I want to feel joy, but
Yes.
but wanting to feel more joy, I needed to be prepared to feel more pain. You can only experience the level of joy to the level that you're able to experience pain. And that is something that we need to recognize that is a part of life. And emotions and feelings will ebb and flow. And that is learning to ride the tide, so to speak, of dealing with our emotions. But that takes work. That doesn't come overnight. That takes a lot of different practices to learn to do that effectively.
Yes, it's so true. You know, and even just my experience at the treatment recovery center, people are coming in there to, get off the drugs and the alcohol. And then I always tell them, as a warning that all the feels are going to start coming up. And within about 3 weeks, we can start to see some deeply rooted behavioral issues, right? But all of the feels that they were numbing themselves from, which led to the addiction. But again, I can't say it enough. The see it, feel it, heal it. I know it's cliche, but I will continue to say
It's the
that.
truth. We have to feel
Yeah,
it to
it
heal
is.
it. And there's no such thing as a
Yeah.
bad emotion. We tend to think,
Yeah. Oh, that's very
yeah,
true. Yes.
I was conditioned to think that, anger was bad. Anger's not bad. Anger serves a purpose,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
All of fear serves a purpose. Shame serves a
Yes.
purpose. Toxic shame doesn't have any place in our lives. We need to work on that. But shame, all these emotions, they're valid emotions in the sense they're there to send us messages about how we're showing up in the world and things that we may need to correct or look at in our own lives.
Yeah, agreed. And I really like that anger piece too, because, I think as men, people have been taught that we can't express anger because it's inappropriate and we scare people. We don't want to scare people in our anger, but I think if it's expressed in a way that is appropriate, that it does need to be released from the body. Anger is a very powerful emotion, and it can cause a lot of psychosomatic symptoms in people too, because it's trapped in the body. And that's where you can start seeing like back pain, shoulder pain, headaches, migraines, stuff.
I'd agree. And yeah, the difference now in the anger that I experience is I get angry. I still get angry a lot.
Of course, me
The
too.
difference now is
Yeah.
I've learned how to process that anger and show up and communicate in a way that's not aggressive or passive aggressive,
Yes.
but assertive.
Yes.
Because we're not heard by people when we're aggressive or passive aggressive. We need to find the balance, which is in the middle, which is communicating in a way that's assertive and kind and
Yeah.
loving. And even if it hurts someone's feeling, if you're saying it from a place of integrity and authenticity, that is how our messages are best received.
I really, really love that. And that's why I think that everybody should experience therapy of some sort, because we didn't get taught this in school. And if you're not actively seeking this information, like on the internet or through books and stuff, then you'll never know these tools that are available to us in order to learn how to process those emotions.
This kind of opens up a little bit of a place in my life that I experienced when I didn't have the tools that I had, and I'm sure there are people that have experienced this, but there was a time in my life back in 2016 after my motorcycle accident, after my my wife at the time was ready to leave me. I was struggling with overeating. I gained a lot of weight. I was in a bad place, and I just remember one day I went back in my bedroom and I was prepared to end it all. I held a gun in my mouth and
Ooh.
I was about to pull the trigger, and I saw my two daughters flash into my mind. And that was the only
Wow,
thing that stopped me
powerful.
from pulling the trigger. There was no resiliency. There was no want or will to want to live anymore. I wanted to die. I
Yeah.
wanted it to be over. I was
Yeah.
tired of living. But for me, I found hope in
Wow.
seeing my children in my mind. I'm like, there's the one thing that I could hold on to where I could put this gun down. And I sought help. I sought help, and I went to a psych with the VA. They had a
Yeah.
psychiatric place that I went to and spent a week there. But there was a lot of things that were compounded at that time, and that really was the catalyst for, like, you know what? I have children. I need to start doing the work to change. And that's when I started, I would say,
Yes.
therapy that was not trauma informed therapy. It was talk
Mhm.
therapy.
Yeah.
And while it served me to a purpose, I really didn't realize after several years of that that it was trauma informed therapy is what I really needed.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a very vulnerable
Yeah.
space,
Yeah, it was a tough
right?
space.
And yeah, and statistically the numbers are like I can't even wrap my head around it.
Well, the military and one of the things I advocate is 22 a day.
Hmm. Oh,
So that's
God.
way too many, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know what the current statistics are now, but
Hmm.
yeah, for U.S. veterans, yes, it was 22 a day on average that were
Yeah.
taking their life. And that is
Yeah.
one of the things why I find it's important for me to advocate not only for humanity but also for veterans. And there's also similar statistics in the field, the firefighting field, and other friends
Yes.
that I have that are in fields that are community service based. That
Yeah.
also,
First
yes,
responders and
first
stuff.
responders,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's powerful and I'm so glad that someone such as yourself that can be brave and step into this arena and share your story and advocate because somewhere this message is going to get through to somebody who might be contemplating that right now.
yeah. And if anyone is listening to this or has thought about it,
Mhm.
the one thing I want to tell you, and I really want you to hear me, is that there is help. There is a
Yes.
possibility to change the direction of your life, and you can reach out for help, and you don't have to quit because there are people that love you. And I don't know you, and if you're listening to this and you're one of those people that are in that place, I love you. I do. I don't know you, but I
Yeah.
love humanity. So you're loved, and
Yes.
you need to hear that.
Me too. I love you too. Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing, it's power in numbers. Right. And the thing is, like, when people feel so alone, it's amazing how much support and love you can get from a perfect stranger that just shares a similar experience, and I highly encourage people to reach out, even on the online, like the social media communities, like you and I met through social media, and now we're having this conversation. And the same can go for them too. So just never give up on yourself.
And we're here. We're
Yeah.
doing the work, and come reach out to me. I don't do this work. I'm not personally. I'm not doing this for money. I don't need to.
Yeah.
I do this because I want to help people. So yeah, if you ever have
Yeah.
questions and you need someone to talk to, send me a message on Healing Roots on Up. I'd love to talk to you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. Yeah. Now, like as far as your initial journey in the recovery and rebuilding your life, obviously it doesn't happen overnight. Was there any relapses or times where you're like, this isn't working? Like, how long? What did that journey look like?
Um, well, I want to be very clear about the journey. Is I'm still on it.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Ah,
end,
yeah.
and that is was a misconception for me. I used to think that once we start the journey, we get to a place where we can jump up and down and say, "I made it," and that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
So, and I'm not saying this to discourage anyone, but the reality is, as we grow, we learn to handle life in ways that we haven't been able to handle them before. So growth
Ah,
is a
yes.
lifelong journey, and our hope is that we are willing to learn, we are willing to be open, we are willing to listen to other people, maybe people that you're not used to talking to, maybe people that you've judged in the past as being weird or different. Don't judge people that you think are weird and different because that is where I found love. That is where I found
Ah,
acceptance.
interesting.
you
Yeah.
know so it's those people,
Yeah.
and when I start to let go of some of the people I used to vibe with and hang out with and chill with and commiserate with, I still have some of those friends in my life under different terms now, but now it's
Yeah.
I go to the people that are authentic, that are real, that are safe and supportive. And that is part of the process, that is part of the journey. Is you're going to change your friend network if you want to change.
Ah,
It's going
yeah.
to change, and it even goes for family members. I love my family, but there's certain dynamics in family relationships that I had to change in how I show up to, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It is okay. Absolutely. So now when you became a mental health advocate, was there a pivotal moment in that? Because I mean, we can heal and do our journey, but what made you want to be an advocate for this?
Well, I got into a place where I started self reflecting. And this was probably back in 2020, about 5 years ago. All right. I had already been in counseling for several years and I've been doing the work. And then I watched a video, and I'm going to put a small plug in here for a guy who's I believe he's in Canada too. His name is Tim Fletcher.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tim Fletcher. He does amazing work.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
he's all over YouTube and he's growing. And I was watching a video of him, and it was called "What Is Shame?" And when I was watching the video, I saw a mirror of myself, and that was when I started to realize how narcissistic I really was. And that almost caused a visceral reaction. I almost wanted to puke. Okay. It was so hard to see, but I continued to watch the video and sit through it. And I felt all the shame coming up at me and all the things that were pointing to me that saying, Stephen, you're a narcissist, and not from a clinical standpoint, but in general terms, Steve, you
Yep.
are very narcissistic. And that was the point that not only did I want to change, but I did not want to see myself as a narcissist. So I started watching more videos and I'm going to counseling. I'm doing different modalities of therapy. I'm in cognitive processing therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy to regulate my emotions. I mean, I feel like I've done them all,
Yeah.
right? But then I got to a placement and I'm like, wow, I am picking up a lot of tools. And I'm also starting to become conscious and awake. I'm starting to
Ah,
wake up
yeah.
not only to my own narcissism, right? Because I thought it was I'm the only one who's a narcissist. I'm the only one who's only thinks about
Mm.
myself. And then I started to look around. I'm like, wow, I see narcissism everywhere.
Oh,
So it
yes.
was
Yep.
it wasn't until I'm like, okay, now I can see it because before I couldn't see it. And when we're traumatized, we can't see ourselves clearly, right? So when I start to see myself clearly, I start to get these insights, and I will call them these insights that were coming from my spirit, right? I would sit
Yes.
down, I started to do things like breath work and meditation, and it was very uncomfortable at first. But then I started to get these insights that would come up and would give me information not only about myself, but of the world. And when I started to see
Yeah.
the world and myself for who I was and who people really were, that was at the moment where I decided I want to advocate and share my story with people. I want to tell people about the journey that I'm going through, where I'm trying to shed the narcissism off of me. And there are folks out there that believe once a narcissist, always a narcissist. And that is black and white, dualistic thinking. And that is just untrue. And it's
Yes.
unfair to people that have experienced high levels of trauma, and to put someone in a box is unfair. Because I am one of those people
I
that
agree.
climbed out
Yeah.
of the cellar of despair and came to a place,
Yeah.
and I am living proof that people can change. People can become much more empathetic, have boundaries, and yeah, it's not fair. There are people out there that have very large channels all about narcissism, and
Yes.
it's
Yep.
discouraging. And so I want to challenge people to look at people, and before you call someone a narcissist, you need to look in the mirror. So
Yes, that is so true. You know, it's interesting because when I took my counseling program, when we were starting to learn about the personality disorders, like antisocial personality disorder, the narcissism, and all of the things, I remember the instructor said that don't be alarmed, but you're going to check off at least 1 to 3 items in every box. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a narcissist. And it's true. But the thing is though, is these are learned behaviors for the most part. Because like if you see like a sociopath or a psychopath, those numbers are actually quite low. It's quite rare. But all of the other ones are learned behaviors, and guess what? They can be unlearned as well.
absolutely, absolutely. There was a lot of the word conditioning comes to mind. Programming. So I
Yes.
received a lot of conditioning and programming. I grew up in a place that there was a lot of racism, a lot of homophobia, and
Hmm.
guess what?
Yep.
I became racist and homophobic, right? But
Yep.
through self
Yep.
reflecting and developing empathy and love and acceptance for myself, I started to see that in everyone around me, despite their color, despite their sexual preferences. I was able to see beyond the labels and see people for their human self. And that is who I'm connected to, and that is who I'll extend love to.
Yeah, I love that. And just going back to like all of the modalities that you've learned, I think that that's really important to try on a few different types because, when you look in a directory of like counseling or therapists, there's so many to choose from. And it's like, hey, just go try on a few, just, 3 to 6 sessions here and 3 to 6 sessions there, because I think it is actually important to expand your toolbox.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say
Yeah.
I just, excuse me, I just completed another round of therapy in January. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. Is and it's
Oh,
it's almost a spiritual therapy type of modality, but it's learning that we are the observer of our thoughts and our emotions and our sensations. That we are not once we fuse to our thoughts, right? Then we believe them to be true, or once we fuse to our emotions, when we believe them to be true, then we act on a place as if that is our truth, and that isn't. Because when we attach or fuse to these ideas of our thoughts and our emotions, then we make decisions based off of that. But when we develop our values, and that's what I was speaking about earlier, when we develop our values and come from a place of love and kindness, that's how we show up much more, much differently in society.
yeah. Yeah, I really enjoy that. And I'll just add a little bit to that too, because even our nervous system is based on a foundation of thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and then the personal narrative that we attach to those behaviors, right? And then you get all those ego defense mechanisms in there where we deny, rationalize, justify, and like I love what you said, it's not necessarily the truth at all.
It's not, and that's the one thing that
Yeah.
it's been serving me much better because there's times I get angry with people.
Yeah.
Or,
Well, yeah, and even as a counselor, like I can get frustrated too because sometimes I will come in with a bias and I have to put that in check. Like I really do. Like that's why sometimes I try not to read people's files before I meet them the first couple of times, because I don't want to judge them on the crimes that they've committed, even though they are pretty bad, some of them, right? But I just try to go into it and just have just look at that person that's in front of me for the first couple of sessions, and get a feel. And generally, what I say is just shrink them down into little itty bitty children again and put them in your heart,
that's
right?
beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
Because at
Yeah,
the end of the day, and this is what I've learned, all the things I've done in the past are things that I've done. It's not who I am. So when we
yeah,
attach to what we've done, and for anyone out there who's committed crimes, whatever, you're not you're not the thing that you committed. So you can learn to detach from that. Doesn't mean you don't have to process and work through it and forgive or seek forgiveness for things that
yeah.
you may have done, but that doesn't also define you as the human being you are in the present moment. And I think that's why mindfulness is so important, is learning to stay in the present
Love
moment
it.
because a lot of times we think about things we've done in our past. I am guilty of that. I
Yeah,
still do it. And that is an
me
opportunity
too.
where I bring myself back into the present moment and I'm like, I am here, I am now. I get grounded. Um, I put my feet on the ground. I'll get down and meditate. And I'll just say to myself, I will say to myself, I am here, I am now, I am in the present moment. And I'll say that to myself
Yes.
several times to bring me right back to center.
Yeah, and that's so true, and the thing is that we wouldn't be able to be the mentors, the guides, or helping people on this healing journey if we don't come from a lot of lived experience. And I think that meeting people where they're at does, they benefit from someone who has lived experience. Not discrediting the academic part of it, because I wouldn't be able to do this without the academic part of it, with the research and the knowledge that we have. But again, just that lived experience and meeting them where they're at is so important.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's a lot of people that have a ton of academic
Hmm.
experience, and that's wonderful.
Yes.
It's wonderful to the
Yeah.
point that you don't identify it and make it a part of your identity because that's the ego. So it's good to be knowledgeable,
Yes.
but I believe the first step in knowing is knowing that we don't know shit.
Yes. Isn't that the truth?
So
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that's important. And there's a lot of people out there that use their knowledge as weapons and manipulate people for selfish reasons. But, academics serve a function. And like for yourself and
Yes.
you becoming a counselor, that served you. And that's great. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I've heard you mention a couple of different tools, meditation, breath work, mindfulness. Is there any other tools you'd like to share with the viewers that you found effective in overcoming adversity?
but yeah, emotional regulation is one that I've had to learn. And that has been one of the tougher ones. And that takes, for me, that took having to take steps like an EMDR and brain spotting because there was stuff in my
Oh,
past that I was so stuck on that was still
mhm.
operating deep in my subconscious. And EMDR was something that helped relieve some of the stress, fears, and pain and anger associated to things that have happened in the past. So
Yeah.
that was for me it was a necessary modality that helped me to develop my own emotional regulating skills. Um,
Hmm.
so meditation is something that I try to do on a daily basis. Sometimes
Okay.
it's not only just sitting down in a Buddha stance, but
Hmm.
um, there's also yoga. I think movement is very important. When we're moving our bodies and there's a mind body connection. So when I'm moving, if I'm on a walk or if I'm on a jog, that's where most of my creativity seems to come from is when I'm moving. And I don't know, really, I don't
Yes.
understand it. It just is for me. I don't need to understand it. But
Yeah.
when I'm moving my body, I get so many amazing insights. But it's also good for you, right?
Yes.
So there's exercise, which is very important. Eating nutritiously. Okay, for a long time there was times where I would just order out and stuff like that, but now I've moved to more of a whole foods based, eating style that works for me. It may not work for everyone, but
Yeah.
getting away from the processed foods doesn't help.
Very.
So nutrition
Yes.
is a very important part of this, lifestyle changes. I
Hmm.
think it's important to continue to read and read stuff that expands your
Yes.
consciousness, challenges your beliefs. So read different genres of books. I prefer a lot of spiritual books these days, but that's my preference. But I like psychology books. I like Carl Jung and there's
Yeah.
stuff like
Me too.
that. Podcasts
Yeah.
like yours, definitely
Yeah.
gotta listen to yours. And
Oh, thank
yeah,
you.
but podcasts like
Yeah.
this have been very helpful for me.
Hmm.
So that's a tool. I mean, if you need information, find some podcasts that talk about complex PTSD or borderline personality disorder or whatever it is that you're struggling with. There's something out there for everyone.
Yes, so true. I love YouTube for that. YouTube has got
They
everything.
do. You're right. Thank you for saying YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube was also a
Yeah.
great place where
Yeah.
I've learned to deconstruct my own beliefs in a lot of areas.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, podcasts and YouTube have been a big tool for me too. And I always get my clients to watch some stuff on YouTube as well. Like I've watched entire lectures with Jordan Peterson, like hours and hours. It's like being signed up in his class. It's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of free stuff on YouTube
There
that you
is.
don't need to
Yeah.
go pay for. There's a lot of, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, as long as you have a Wi-Fi signal and a phone or a
Mhm.
computer, um, you know, the, there's so much access to information.
So now, Stephen, at the beginning of our interview, you did mention that people could reach out to you through your email or through Instagram. Now, how do you actually support individuals who are currently facing trauma and struggling with mental health issues? What does that look
So
like?
one of the things I will say to that is that I am not a therapist. I didn't go to college. A
Hmm.
lot of this stuff is learned, and so
Yeah.
I've learned a lot of stuff on my own. But there are times that if someone will reach out to me on a direct message, I will occasionally get
Okay.
on a call with someone. And there are times where if I'm helping someone beyond maybe an hour or something like that. I'm like, okay, we can continue this, but I would accept a love offering. I don't do it for money, but help me, help you by offsetting some of my time with a love offering. So that is one thing that I will occasionally ask for. But a lot of the
Yeah.
support that I give is I develop relationships with followers, and I have a whole bunch of people in my primary contacts that I check in, and they check in with me. I'm like, how you doing? And it's
Oh.
really a lot of I ask a lot of I would say journal prompt questions,
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
self-reflection questions, because people will come to me with an issue and I will turn around and I'll say, have you considered this? And I'll let them chew on that
Hmm.
for a day or two, and then they'll come back and be
Yeah.
like, oh, I got these insights that came up. So the way I support people is I don't do it in a traditional type of one-on-one setting. I used to have a support group which I did away with, that was Zoom, and I had quite a number of people on there, and it became a little bit challenging as far as cost wise and stuff like that. So I had to do away with that.
Yes.
But there are one-on-one opportunities that I am willing to definitely help folks with if they're interested in. Um, but one thing is, one of the boundaries I have for myself is I'm not willing to put out the effort if someone is not willing to listen and do the work.
They have to show
You got
up.
to show up for yourself. I'm willing to
You
show up
have to
with
show
you.
up.
I love you,
Hmm.
and you got to do the work. And if
Yep.
you can't do the work,
Yep.
I can't help you. So,
Yep. Just goes back to that old adage, you can drag a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
yeah. And it
Yeah.
really
And
it
it's
speaks
very
to
true.
codependency. I'm not here to rescue anyone. I'm here to support you.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
I was always looking for someone to rescue me, and the only one that was going to rescue me was me. But I
Absolutely.
found
Yeah.
people that were supportive and loving enough to give me insights to myself that I couldn't see in myself. And there are people out there
Yeah.
that you could find that are friends, and even friends like myself, that are willing to support you and help you. But you have to be willing to reach out and accept it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of my vocabulary is like I highly encourage you. I highly recommend. But again, they have, like you said, they have to show up. Yeah. So do you feel complete? Do you think we covered I think we covered quite a
I
bit.
think we covered quite a bit. I think after reading through what
Yeah.
we talked about and some of the subjects, I don't think we
Yeah.
really missed anything. Um,
Yeah, but we do have to end it with like what message do you want to convey to others who are facing similar challenges?
The message I want to relay to you right now is that if you're facing similar challenges, if you're in a place of despair, hopelessness, even at the point where you're having suicidal ideations, I want you to know that there is hope. There is hope for healing. It takes work. It
Yes.
takes dedication, and you can change. You can do this, and there are people that are out there that love you and want to help you and want to support you through this. My biggest thing that I will tell you that I've been told by a wise psychologist who I love dearly is trust the process. Okay? You're in pain right now. Pain will not go away. Pain is a part of life. But what we can teach and help you is how to tolerate it. We can teach you resiliency. We can give you tools to expand your consciousness and awareness of yourself and others. So there is lots of help out there. You gotta be willing to reach out and ask for it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Stephen. That was very well said. And it's funny because I have trust the process on tattooed on my forearm.
I love that.
Yeah, I have to look at that sometimes,
Yeah,
you
we
know?
forget, right? We forget that it is a
Yeah, we
process
forget.
and it is a
Yeah.
journey. So, yeah, I think I'm
Yeah.
I'm due for some more tattoos. I'm gonna get this hand filled. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate your time today. Your message needs to go far and wide, so I really appreciate your time today.
Rhonda, I appreciate you, and I've done quite a few lives and done a podcast previously, but your professionalism and the way you show up on these things and the way you host is beautiful. So I want you to
Oh,
continue, and I
thank you.
encourage you to trust your process and continue doing this work because you're doing a beautiful job.
Yeah. I really appreciate that, Stephen, because I actually do need to hear that sometimes.
We all need to hear
Oh, I
encouragement. Yeah.
do. Yeah. I think we're episode 23 right now, and let me tell you, there is some struggles that happen behind the scenes here. I mean, you witnessed it, right? We had some tech difficulty, and it happens. But I'm very passionate about this work too. So
And if you ever question or
yeah,
get to the point, it's okay to quit. You don't have to quit forever. Even if you quit for a day, a week, or month, it's okay to rest.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. It might maybe some summer vacation
yeah,
is.
summer vacation is cool too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you.